I'm Erin Brown,
And I'm Eric Trommater.
and this is World Cinema History. This week on World Cinema History, we're going to be discussing the 2010 film Boy by Taika Waititi. It's a lovely little coming-of-age film about fathers and sons living in a small rural area with a lot of poverty and potential and imagination and superpowers and all kinds of lovely things.
My name is Boy, and welcome to my interesting world. My favorite person is Michael Jackson. He is the best singer and dancer in the world. Last month he put out a record called Thriller. It sold a gazillion copies, and now he lives in a castle with a snake and a monkey. He is so famous that you can even see him in the stars. I live in a white house with my nanny and my cousins, Hux, Kiko, Miria, Shay, and Kelly. I have a pet goat called Leaf. I also have a 6-year-old brother called Rocky. He thinks he's got powers. He doesn't.
Yeah, I saw it originally back in 2010 in the theater. I was also 14 in 1984, so I not only saw this film, I lived it. I not only owned Thriller, I wore out my first copy and had to buy a second.
Wow. So you know the significance of Michael Jackson in this film.
Shaman.
I believe I was 6 or 7. I was about Rocky's age. So I remember it, but from a bit of a younger standpoint. Taika Waititi is a Maori director, film director, actor, artist. He's from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I don't know if he's best known for Jojo Rabbit or Thor Ragnarok, but those were two of his biggest films. This film that we're talking about today, Boy, was like the biggest film in New Zealand for a while. I haven't looked up to see if it's been surpassed yet, but when it was released in 2010, it became huge. It was a big deal over there, partially because of the nostalgia. People remember the 80s, and it's about a clever, imaginative kid who's just a very appealing character. You want to see what he's going to do. And just the genuine, heartfelt nature of the film with the comedy, but also it grabs you by the feelings. That really catches people and gets you invested in this film. Boy is the name of the main character. His name is actually Alamein after his father, but he goes by Boy. In fact, in the film, his father is Alamein. His aunts and uncles are Faenza, Tunisia, and Libya. They're all named after battles in World War II. And Taika's grandfather, who was also called Taika, was a Maori battalion member in World War II. So I think that's heavily influenced our Taika, to a degree. In fact, he made a short film called Tamatu, which follows members of the Maori battalion in Italy, and it's just one evening, and they're camped in an abandoned church or possibly monastery, and there's no dialogue in the entire film. So I believe that era really influenced Taika and his grandfather's service during the war. So yeah, Alamein is named after a place, and Boy is named after Alamein. He also has a younger brother named Rocky. We don't know what Rocky is short for, but I don't think he was named after the film. It's possible. Boy hasn't seen his father at least since his brother Rocky was born. So when the film opens, he's describing who he is and where he lives. Then he starts talking about his father and how he's a master carver and a deep sea treasure hunter and all of these amazing things that he can do. And then when he gets back to his seat, because he's presenting this to his class, this kid named Kingy, who I am convinced Taika knew someone named Kingy when he was a kid. This is like a recurring bully name. One shows up in Hunt for the Wilder People as well. But the kid says, no, your father's not doing those things. He's in prison with my father. And it's said so matter-of-factly, like, of course their fathers are in prison. Really depressing, but also kind of funny how matter-of-factly they say it. And then, of course, Boy says, oh, no, he's not in prison. He escaped. Well, how did he escape? He dug his way out with a spoon. And they have this goofy scene that he's imagining of his father digging his way out with a spoon, and he uses his spoon to kill the guards.
What I love about it is that it was done in a silent film style. Slightly
Yeah,
speeded up. He just flings the spoon and it goes right into the guard's skull. I thought it was a great
yeah.
throwback to like the Keystone Cops.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, Taika is great with physical comedy, and he's got a lot of influences from that era. Fun fact: the guard that gets the spoon to the eye is Stu Rutherford, who played Stu in What We Do in the Shadows. He's just a friend of Taika's that shows up in his films. It's pretty great. Great. All of his imaginary sequences with his father are so over the top. At one point, he's telling his brother Rocky that his father was a war hero, and it's shown in black and white of just the back of him, and he's doing this haka to scare all the commies off, and it's all in black and white like an old war film. Visually, this is a really interesting film to watch. The scenery is absolutely gorgeous, but also he knows how to set up shots in a way that draw you in, and you can tell what's imaginary and what's real based on how it's shot. Rocky will draw pictures, and those little animations are part of it to give you Rocky's state of mind. And that's all Taika. He drew those because he's also an artist on top of being a director. And they really carried the emotion of what was happening really well. Like the scene where Alamein finally comes home with his gang. Rocky sees the car coming, and it cuts to drawings of this car pulling up, and as it passes, the interior is all black, and then there's these red glaring eyes and evil teeth as it pulls up, because Rocky's afraid of what's about to happen. He doesn't know these people.
Who are you?
Boy,
What boy?
Alamein.
Elame.
Yeah.
Right. I'm your dad.
Oh. Hey, Dad.
Hey,
Welcome back. Good to see you.
good to see you.
Rocky, come over here. Meet Dad.
Yeah, Rocky. Good to see you, man. Too much.
Say hello, Egg.
Hello, Egg.
So he's nervous when his father finally shows up, but boy is excited. He wants to know who these people are. That introduction was interesting and hilarious. Really super awkward. The car pulls up, and there's just this silence while Boy stares at these three guys sitting awkwardly in the front of the car. And finally, Alamein goes, "Who are you?" "I'm Boy." "What Boy?" And he has to introduce himself as Boy's father. I thought that scene was really interesting as well, because Rocky is kind of in the back watching, and he's never met his father. Alamein disappeared when Rocky was born, and so he's watching. And when Boy introduces Rocky to Alamein, he gets this look on his face, just this really subtle sadness, and he kind of looks at Rocky and then looks away and won't quite look at him, because he knows that Rocky's mother died in childbirth, which makes, to me, Rocky's an interesting character.
Yeah, that I think is the best element of this film is Rocky and his superpowers.
Yeah, he believes he's
And
got these powers. Yeah.
and his brother has convinced him that it was his superpowers that his brother knows he doesn't have, that Boy knows he doesn't have, that killed his mother. And Rocky, and I here's something. I'm going to throw this out there, and you guys can correct me in the comments if you're wrong. Didn't we all, as children, believe we had some kind of a superpower?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know I did. I kept trying to use the Force. It never worked, but I kept trying to. And for a while, I thought I was
Well,
psychic. I wasn't, but
Star Wars didn't come out until I was 7 years old, but I did think I could do mind melds like Spock on Star Trek,
oh,
and I kept pinching my own shoulder blade nerve, thinking if I did it exactly the way Spock did, I could make myself pass out, like when it was nap time or something like that. It's like this is the time it's gonna work, and of course you can't actually.
yeah.
That's a
Yeah, which
superpower.
yeah, they kind of. I know that they tried to explain that on Star Trek as only Vulcans could do it, but
Only Superman has the X-ray vision, but I that didn't stop me from trying. Who hasn't, while in the backseat of their parents' car as a little kid, looked out and thought they had heat ray vision and were able to slice all the cars in front of them. Or
Yeah,
or
you got to
or,
do
or,
something,
or
you
like
know.
or like Moses, tried to part traffic like the Red Sea. I mean, who hasn't done that as a child? What he does with the Rocky character is fascinating because he has not only convinced himself that he has superpowers, he feels guilt because he's been led to believe by his brother that it caused the death of his mother. And to my mind, the best scene in the film, but from both an acting standpoint, from the way that it's shot, and from both its very dark humor, and also how touching the scene is when he and the so-called weirdo, or the character that's listed in the credits as the weirdo, who is the mentally impaired person who lives down by the beach, and he does something with his hand, and coincidentally, the so-called weirdo slips and falls. He says, "I'm sorry, I did that." And the weirdo, because he is basically at a mental level that Rocky is at in terms of IQ, says to him, "Well, can't you use your powers for good?" And there's
Yeah.
this great moment where Rocky's like, it just finally occurred to him that, oh, wait, powers can be a good thing. Because his entire experience up until then, at least in the film, was guilt about.
So once Weirdo tells him to use his powers for good, before that we saw him use his powers to try to, the school bus goes by and throws things at him, and so he reaches his hand out and imagines the bus exploding and everybody dying. But after Weirdo says use your powers for good, he sees a dead rat in the cemetery and he tries to revive it and imagines it becoming a bird and flying away. Their goat Leaf gets hit by a car. He tries to revive the goat, but he can't do it. And finally, towards the end, when the gang has left Alamein and he's all distraught, and he's been trying to find his money and he can't find his money, and he's sitting there drinking on his throne, all of a sudden this little dude with his roller skates, wearing a coat and a cape like a superhero and holding a sparkler, he comes skating into the garage and puts his hand on Alamain's forehead to try to heal him, because he knows that Alamain, has problems. He's still sad. He saw him at the cemetery, not able to bring himself to go inside. So he skates up, puts his hand on Alamain's forehead, and then says, "I'm sorry for what I did to Mom." It's a really moving moment. This poor kid has spent his whole life thinking he's responsible, and he's trying to apologize for it, and it was never his fault. Of course, then we get the rest of it where Boy comes in and confronts Alamein about everything, because he remembers now that Alamein wasn't there for any of it. That was also incredibly moving, I thought.
The fallen idol sequence is what I
Yeah.
call that, where
Yeah.
the shades have been lifted from his eyes. The magic cloud has lifted, whatever phrase you want to use. And
Yeah.
he literally slaps him 3 times.
Yeah,
And
he does.
yeah, I here's where I'm going to say I had a problem with the film.
Mhm.
I didn't think Watiti's performance was up to the material. Now that's not. I'm not using that as a major criticism because he's serviceable enough. But I think of this film and I think of Jojo Rabbit, which are both excellent, excellent films, top notch, and both of them
Oh, yeah.
in this genre of coming of age are films that I would rank with things like Harold and Maude and Kes and The 400 Blows. But I always wondered how great a film, and maybe like if this film would be considered by me one of those great classics that I return to again and again and again, if Watiti had replaced himself in both films with an actual actor that could command your presence. Because what Watiti is doing in this film is so typical of the director as actor, which is line reading. Because, of course, you don't want to take away from your stars by acting over them, which is why, for instance, Orson Welles used to film his scenes in solitude and then film his cast separately when he was directing films. Imagine this film with that character played Alame, the father of Alame, being played by a genuine actor who's giving an actual performance and allows us to work on an emotional level, as opposed to a TD who's just doing line reading. And I think this would be a masterpiece, and I think it's still a great film, even with Waititi's performance. But to me, he was the weakest element of it, as I think he was the weakest element of Jojo Rabbit.
Yes, I mean it.
Where were you?
It's all. Stop
Where
it.
were you?
Stop it. It's enough, man. Okay. Okay.
I thought I was like you, but I'm not. I don't have any potential.
Wow. Okay. I don't agree with that at all. Sorry.
Well, this would be a
Honestly,
boring show if we agreed on everything,
yeah,
Aaron.
it would be. I think Taika was right for the role. He was essentially playing his own father. I mean, this was semi-autobiographical. He based the characters off of himself as a kid and his father. I don't think anybody would know how to play the role of Alamein quite the same way. I think that he knew how he wanted to play him, and also the line delivery in that accent is different. It's not like an American accent. It's a very different. It's not even like a Pakaha New Zealander accent. It's Maori. It's different. It's a bit flatter, a bit. I don't know. It's not the same, and I think that can make the
Well,
lines.
and he's an excellent director of actors, because
Oh yeah,
especially the children actors. But you see really excellent performances all throughout this film, the previous film he made, Ego versus Shark. You see really good performances, and that he is very good with actors. The flatness of the performance is not what got me. It is not relating to the other actors on the screen. And if you look at, for instance, some of the best framed scenes are when he's sitting in that chair with the two antlers. A wonderfully framed scene, but he's not even making eye contact with any of the other actors. It takes you out of the film. Whereas if you had a genuine actor, I think in those scenes, as good as they are, they would just be extremely powerful, because as a writer and as a director of other actors, Watiti's work is so top notch.
I don't know. I think it was a character choice the way that he was playing that role because Alamein is an asshole. Alamein is very self-absorbed, not really interested in what
I
other
can
people are
see that.
saying and doing.
I can see that,
Yeah,
although I don't see him having made the same character choice for Hitler in Jojo Rabbit, which has the exact same problem. But I can see that because Hitler was supposedly an imaginary friend,
yeah.
and perhaps Alame is not what he seems. So I can see that. It feels like a lot of professionals with an amateur at the center. Everything else is done at such a high level, it sticks out, whereas it wouldn't in a lesser film, I think. And so that's probably why I notice it more.
I mean, obviously that's your opinion of it, and my opinion is different.
Well, no. I mean, if you think Watiti's a good actor, that's just fine. There's no fact about what makes a good performance. I don't think
Yeah,
he's a particularly good actor. I think he's a very good director and a very good writer, though.
yeah,
You
and he's
know.
the first person to say that he'd rather direct than act. But having seen his performance in other things, especially Our Flag Means Death, I think that he can do it. He's not terrible. He's no slouch. I don't think anybody could have done that the way that
Well,
the connection between Reese and Taika in that series is kind of what made the relationship work so well, in my opinion. So
now, I do think he gives a really good performance in What We Do in the Shadows.
oh yeah, he's brilliant in that. I love that. I love that movie so
I think
much.
he is really good in
And
that.
that's
But
that's one thing he
he's
doesn't
not
really.
directing himself. He's not directing
Yeah,
himself. And also on his Our Flag Means Death, he's not really directing himself, because he directed the first two episodes in which Blackbeard isn't actually in it all that much, and the episodes that Blackbeard is
yeah.
predominant in were directed by other people. So maybe it's when he directs himself that he has this thing that doesn't bother you but does me.
That's probably got a lot to do with it. I don't think we're ever supposed to really be pulled into Boy's hero worship of his father. I think we're supposed to see through it, and we're supposed to see that he's a dick.
He's a comic buffoon from the very first scene. Even if the fantasies of him are
Yeah,
make him look like a buffoon.
when he's trying to look cool later in real life, like when when he threatens Holden, Kenny's brother, with a machete, and he swings it on the rope and just fails miserably and gets all tangled up and has to grab the kid and put him against the tree and they go, stand here. And then he tries to stab the machete into the tree. And it's just, he just totally bungles it,
And
but
he
still
keeps
intimidates the
stabbing
kid.
and stabbing and stabbing, and it's not sharp enough, so it won't penetrate the bark.
Yeah, the tree is too tough and the machete is not sharp enough. And he just looks ridiculous, but it's effective. I think one of the funniest is when he goes Dukes of Hazzard and tries to jump in through the window of his car. Like that's another thing. What kid of the '80s never tried to do that? I know I did. But he does that, and he gets
I still have a scar under one of my armpits from having done that.
oh no, yeah. I think that's a
Like
universal
four,
thing. We all thought it was cool,
40 some years later.
But like he tries to do that, and he gets all caught up in it and hunks the horn like 3 times with his knee, and then grins and leaves. Taika is a brilliant physical comedian. I think the reason it works so well in What We Do in the Shadows is he was improvising. They had a direction the story was supposed to go, but they improvised the dialogue, and they didn't show the script to anybody. He and Jermaine Clement. They co-directed that one. So Jermaine mostly directed the actors, I believe, and Taika was
That's
mostly
correct. That
the
that
visuals
was
and
correct.
whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, I think in
A-
this he's... Hmm?
And this does not have an improvisational feel. This feels very
Yeah.
tight. The way
Yeah.
What We Do in the Shadows felt very loose. I think Jojo Rabbit felt very tight. Whereas Hunt for the
Yeah.
Wilder People did have a kind of improvisational feel to it. And yet, of course, if you read about it, it's actually even more tightly scripted than either of those.
I think the only thing
So
that would have been improvised in Hunt for the Wilder People would have been Reese Darby's scenes, because he does let Reese improvise whenever he can. He does like to
he
improvise with his
does he
actors.
does normally, and he wants to. But from what I was reading, he tried to recreate the feeling, and he worked very hard to make it feel improvisation. But because
Hmm.
they were on such a tight budget, he couldn't.
Yeah,
And that was one of his regrets. And yet, if you watch that, that's a very, very. This is not like that at all. This is not easygoing. This doesn't feel improvisational. Feels very tight. This feels like a great short story by. I was going to say O.
is it O.
Henry,
Henry? Yeah.
but I'm
Okay.
going to come up with a better metaphor.
Okay.
This this feels like a very tight short story with everything planned out. I remember in 2010 thinking this was probably inspired a lot by the American Wes Anderson. On this viewing, I I can't remember anything Wes Anderson did that was this tight, where every line sets up a line later in the film. For instance, when he's telling his son, don't get her pregnant when boy is talking about a girl, and then later on she's in the car with that girl.
Fitch. I'm bored. Well, you can see my dick, but I ain't allowed to get you pregnant, you fucking asshole.
I can't think of a Wes Anderson film that as tight as this is in terms and it's 86 or 85 minutes long or something like that, and it feels like it's about 20 minutes because
Yeah.
it just spools along. I mean, it's structurally just a masterpiece, but it's also, and I don't know if we've emphasized this enough, laugh out loud funny from
Yeah.
beginning to end. I saw this in the
He's
same
insightful.
theater with the same audience that I saw Step Brothers with a couple of years before.
Okay.
Uh, And I can tell you, the audience that I was with laughed so much harder at this film than they did even at Step Brothers, which of course Step Brothers is deliberately a film where every single scene is meant to make you laugh, whereas this is trying the harder trick of the comedy drama, which has an actual, and this is what I really give it credit for, I not just plot, but hey, what the heck is going to happen next type plot. This isn't a
Yeah.
character study. You know, if you took the characters out and put different characters into this story, it would still be a great film because it's a great story.
Yeah. It is. It really, you follow it the whole way through. You want to see what's going to happen next. And it's very relatable, I feel like, because I think we all have issues on some level with our parents, you know? At the very least, we all at some point in our lives realize our parents aren't the idealized versions of them we have in our heads. And to have him have Boy hit with that so dramatically, because he wants to believe in his father. He wants to
What?
believe all the stories he's come up with about his father.
Let's
What were you
let's
saying?
let's drill into that though a little bit, Aaron, shall we? Because I think that the relationship between Rocky and Alameda Junior Boy, Little Shogun, it is the most fascinating in the film because, of course, the reason Rocky can see through Alameda Senior is because he never met him, so he never had an idealized vision of him. So he's seeing him for the first time. He's seeing him with strangers' eyes.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I think it's beautiful because this is distinctly narrated from Alameda Junior Boy Little Shogun's eyes.
Hmm.
You know, but we are observing the character through both him and Rocky's eyes in a way. And I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, we really are, especially with the animations that show what Rocky is thinking. I love that touch to it. I love that he did that because it's so simple on the surface, but you really understand what's happening in this child's head. And that's hard to do because I mean, kids aren't known to be brilliant actors. These kids were great. Funny story. There was another kid cast as Boy, and James Ralston came to be an extra, and they auditioned him for the lead role and actually replaced the original kid with him because he was so much better. I don't know who the original kid was. I feel sorry for him, but at the same time, this was the right kid for the role. This little dude, he knew what he
Oh,
was doing.
well, from top to bottom, though, the entire cast is excellent. I mean,
Yes, it really is.
and as someone who I'm sorry, child actors bug me
Yeah,
normally
they're
in
frequently
films,
terrible.
you know. uh, Morengi Tihor, I believe it's pronounced as Dallas's sister Dynasty. I
Yeah.
she I don't think there's a suggestion in the screenplay that she has a soft spot for Boy or some affection for him because there's nothing in the dialogue. That's all in the way she looks at him, and
Yes.
the reason you feel that is all every bit of it just comes from her performance.
Yeah.
Perhaps it wasn't even written that way. I really think that was an actress having given her character a background and brought that to us, it's really well done. Whether that was Waititi as a director or her as an actress, it works really really well, and it gives the film another layer of subtlety because then those scenes have a little more sizzle to them than they normally
Yeah,
would.
definitely. I think I think it was meant to be there a bit because she's obviously jealous of Chardonnay. Because for whatever reason, Boy really likes Chardonnay, but she doesn't care at all. But when he gets the sparklers and they all want to play with the sparklers, but he won't let them because he's saving them for a special occasion, then he gives one to Chardonnay. At the end of the film, when he goes to apologize to Dynasty for when his father stole the entire marijuana crop, he just gives her a sparkler, and that was the apology, and that worked. I think we're supposed to make that connection that he should have given her the sparkler to begin with. You know, he should have shared it with her and his other friends. But yeah, she was great. That actress as Dynasty was so good.
This kind of smells like marijuana. You shouldn't smoke it. You'll end up like all the rest of them dopeheads around here. Laughing at nothing and crying at everything. Where you been anyway? Ain't seen you in ages.
Hanging with the old man. So who are you here with?
My mum, she's playing the pokies.
She win anything?
Nah. She reckons it's better to risk your money on something big, be real poor, instead of sitting around being a bit poor. Far, you've been missing out on all the fun. We pushed Maōri off the wharf yesterday.
Didn't got time for that good stuff. I'm working, trying to get out of this dump.
When you guys leaving?
Dunno. When my dad's free, I guess. But he's a busy man.
They always are.
It's a great scene. And it's what's interesting is that there's a theme going through it that the women, the female characters, are the responsible and mature ones, which kind of sucks because that's kind of how it is in life, and it's not fair. But
I beg to differ. Nan is completely irresponsible, putting
oh yeah,
Boy in charge of all of those children for 2 weeks.
yes, yeah, that was irresponsible. But at the same time, where Taika was coming from, he said that was kind of normal for the '80s in that area. Kids just ran around on their own all the time. And I mean, I remember being a kid back then and, come home when the streetlights come on was the idea. You could just do whatever you wanted. And like my brother and I would come home after school. We'd walk home from school and he was only 10 or 11, but we would be home alone until our parents got home. It was a different time back then. Remember, the past is another country. Huh? Um,
They did things differently there.
they did things very differently there. Yeah.
I was a latchkey child. I had my key around my neck, and I got home from school at 3:30 and locked myself in until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night when my parents came home. I turned out okay. No, I'm joking. I did not. I did not. But that gave us more time to listen to, Michael Jackson's Thriller over and over again. And
Yes.
let me think, what else did we do in 1984? Let's see, The Police, Synchronicity. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did that. Yeah, let's see. Was there anything not music related? Oh yes, E.T. Phone Home. Yeah, which comes up quite a bit as well in this film.
Yes, it does. So the film actually opens with a quote from E.T. It says, "You could be happy here. We could grow up together." And that kind of sets the tone for the film because he's not just growing up with Rocky, he's growing up with Alamein as well, because Alamein has a lot of growing up to do, where the women are shown as being responsible, apart from the grandmother who just left them. Because I'll give you that. That was who would leave an 11-year-old in charge of all of these toddlers. But Auntie Gracie has all the jobs in town. Dynasty is responsible for picking her father's marijuana. And she's the one telling him in that clip where they're in the car together that, don't be like these potheads, don't be like them. You can do better than that. It seems like all of the women are trying to say, you can do better than this. You don't have to be like this. And Alamein has a lot of growing up to do. He's putting on a big show of being the big man around town, and he's a dick to his fellow gang members because he's in charge and he wants to look good in front of his family, but he's full of shit. He's not good at much of anything. And he's running from his pain, from their mother, Joni, dying. He hasn't been around at least since then. He probably left before that. Because one thing that's really interesting that I liked, one thing that I liked was when Rocky asked what their mother was like. Again, he didn't want to have to tell him all over again, but he did. He shares these memories, and it's him and his mother and Alamein, and they're hanging out on the beach, and they're hanging out in a tree and telling jokes and laughing. And then when Joni died, Alamein's there at the foot of the bed crying. And then later in the film, he has the true memories come back up. And Alamein wasn't in any of it. It makes you wonder how much Boy actually did know of Alamein when Alamein left, or if he was put in prison. That's why he wasn't there, because he was in jail. We know that part. We don't know when that
And we know
happened.
why. And we know why. Because this shares another thing with Our Flag Means Death. Buried treasure.
Mm-hmm.
At that time when you need something for the characters to be doing, let's go find the thing. It's a
Yeah,
perfect MacGuffin, so that you can, because you do need that time to learn who these characters are, and you have to have them interact for this story to work. Because of course the underlying metaphor of this that is set out by Craig Hall as Mr. Langston, who had gone to school with Senior Alame, and he says he had potential and you have potential, is the definition of this word potential. It's during those treasure hunting scenes when he's looking for this loot that he buried, but he can't remember exactly where it is, that you have him trying to define what the word potential means. And of course, then you get that wonderful ending scene that you mentioned right after Rocky asks for forgiveness. And he basically says, well, I don't want to have potential if it means being like you. And,
yeah.
but the whole metaphor of potential is brought home during those and it's a masterful piece of filmmaking and a masterful piece of writing, and it's what I think made this film, watching it to this time, I was absolutely just blown away by the amount of skill that went into it, and I can see why it was the most popular film in New Zealand at the time, because it's superior to even in terms of America, 90% of films that I've seen since then.
Oh, absolutely. It is such a well written and well put together film. I I think the whole metaphor for potential is very interesting on the metaphorical level and on the personality level. Mr. Langston tells Boy that he's got potential like his father. Then he asks, "What does that mean?" And Mr. Langston is just like, "It's 3:30. I'm off the clock," and he leaves and won't tell him. And so this whole time, Boy has no idea what that word means. And he looks it up in the dictionary, and the definition doesn't give him any clues. He doesn't know what it means. But the sad thing is, you can see that he does have potential. And you can see that Alamein had potential when he was Boy's age, but he didn't fulfill that potential. So potential for him just became the money. But he could have done so much more with his life, and he didn't. When Boy says he's a master carver, you see some of his carvings. There's one in the garage. It's not as good as the one that Boy imagined, but you see a carving there. And when Boy has his own carving and Alamein looks at it, and tells him that it's good, you can see that he's appreciating what this kid can do. The artistic potential is there. They both have that quality.
Well, and
Um,
that's capped off at the end when because he says about the eyes. He says, you
yeah,
didn't, because you always finish the eyes last. And when Alamein leaves it behind, he finishes the eyes for him
yeah.
as his going away gift.
I thought that was so moving that he put the eyes in because he genuinely appreciated that this kid did a carving like he did. The carvings have a lot of cultural significance in Maori culture. So him being a master carver is a big deal. Taika's father was a carver too. He was an artist and he was also a master carver. And a lot of that visual art is where, that's where Taika gets it too. So the potential, they both have it. It just, how's it going to express itself? And with Alamein, he didn't do anything with it, but Boy has time to do something with it. He could become, something great. His father acknowledging that, I personally think that's a little wish fulfillment on Taika's part, because he has said in an interview that a lot of what he does is try to get, recognition from his father, to have his father appreciate what he does. His father passed away in 2015, so, it's a little late for that. And he has said that his father was proud of what he did, but I don't know for sure how proud he was. So having that moment in there where Alamein puts the eyes in Boy's carving as a way of saying, "I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've done." That's incredibly heartwarming to me. And I think that Taika needed that for himself as well.
Well, getting back to the autodidact moments where he's looking up definitions and attempting to teach himself, it reminded me of a film that we did last season called Kess, the 1969 Ken Loach film, which was an indictment of the tripartite school system in England. And Kess is about a kid named Billy Casper who steals a book on falconry so that he can teach a bird. And that scene where he's looking it up in the dictionary and having trouble sounding out what the definition is, after you see what just the lousy Maori school system that they go to and how little that they teach there really brought back memories of Cass to me.
It looks like Maori and he's got AIDS.
Don't be stupid. Kids can't get AIDS. Only gays.
Yeah, well, he's a gay. He goes out with boy.
Shut up, Kingy.
Ooh, what are you gonna do? Get your brother on me or something?
That picture looks like Kingy's undies when he shat his pants on sports day. Remember?
Fuck up, boy.
You fuck up.
You fuck up.
You fuck up.
Fuck up.
Hey, both of you fuck up or I'll send you to the principal. Now, who's it all?
Yeah, okay, that's personal, but we're discussing it alongside one of the great films of all time, and it's holding up, which tells you something. We all know how fussy I am about movies.
Yeah, definitely. And something that Taika has also said, I believe it was a PSA that he did about racism and how racism is terrible, because it is. And he showed a picture of himself, a little younger than Boy, and said, would you look at that kid and tell him he has no potential? Well, people did, because if you're a brown kid, they expect you can't do anything. And then look at how far he's come. It's a very interesting PSA. And I think that that's a big part of the education that they had, and why Alamein didn't live up to the potential that he had, is because, at that time, in that place, these folks were not seen as good enough to do anything, which, good old racism, colonialism strikes again.
Well, isn't part of that, though, the same thing that you were talking about? Because the women characters kind of allow that as well. The one version of the aunt runs the post office and the local store and is basically the adopted mother of almost all the children. All of the women seem to be making it so the men don't have to achieve their potential, so to speak. Because of course, all the men here are shown as biker gangs or Dallas's father, growing marijuana and then beating up people for stealing it. Somebody has to do the work, and it's the women folk in this community that it seems to fall on.
Yeah, and that's sadly true worldwide. I can't speak for Maori society, but I know that as a woman in this country, we were raised to girls are more responsible, girls grow up faster than boys, all this stuff. We're supposed to be young ladies from an early age. Boys aren't expected to do that. Boys are allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. And that's how you end up with, like, I
Weirdos
was married.
hosting podcasts about foreign
Well,
language films.
I was So I was going to say that. I was also going to say, divorced women at 47 being on podcasts talking about weird foreign films. But no, I mean, I was married for 14 years to a guy
Absolutely.
that did nothing,
Absolutely. So thank goodness for sexism, because we wouldn't be here without it.
Or maybe men could do their share. Don't put it all on us, man.
I know, but I needed a week off. I had to get somebody to host it, and you're the only one who can. You're the only one who can speak in coherent sentences and not trail off for half an hour. So,
Well, thank you. I do my best. I blame the autism. I get on a tangent and I can just info dump. Anyway, we should probably get back on track. What were we talking about?
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about what our favorite scenes in the film are. How's that?
The first one that comes to mind, I absolutely love when Alamein shows up with his gang and they sit in the car and introduce themselves. And they're just sitting there awkwardly. And finally, Boy says, "You guys want a cup of tea?" And it cuts to them holding cups of tea in the front seat of the car. Because Boy didn't think to invite them in until afterward.
That's Kelly.
Yeah, niece. I'm your uncle, Elamine.
Oh, great, another one.
Well, these are my mates, Juju and Chopper. Yeah, basically your uncles.
So you guys want a cup of tea?
Oh, yeah? Yeah, a cup of tea sounds good.
So you fellas wanna come inside?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do that.
Another thing it has in common with another Waititi project, What We Do in the Shadows, of course, vampires
Mhm.
can't go into your house unless they're invited in.
That's true. Not just houses. They couldn't get into any of the clubs they wanted to go to unless they were invited in. That's why they couldn't get into Boogie Wonderland until they had Nick the Vampire, who was friends with the bouncer. I've seen that movie many
See,
times.
it's all part of the Waititi universe.
And his sense of humor is that goofy, kind of deadpan, something ridiculous happens and nobody acknowledges how ridiculous it is. Like when he goes Dukes of Hazzard and jumps in the car and it fails miserably. That's the kind of thing he does very, very well. Just nobody's acknowledging how stupid it looks. So that's one of my favorites, is when they have the tea in the car. To think of some others. What's one of yours?
I would go with the scene in the garage in which he's throwing the party and he asks him to stop calling him dad.
A little simple beer. Little one. Good.
Yep.
11, eh? That's pretty young for your first sip. Now, if you find any more of that stuff, you can bring it to me, eh?
Yep.
And can you stop calling me dad? Sounds weird. Besides, we're more like bros, you and me.
What shall I call you?
I don't know, what do you reckon?
Alamein?
Maybe. What about Shogun? I like that.
What's Shogun?
Samurai master. Like a commander. He rules the samurais.
Like a Ariki.
Yeah, but he's a samurai. Samurais are better.
Shogun.
Yeah, oh, that sounds good.
So what shall we call me?
I don't know. Little Shogun, that'd be funny.
He doesn't want to be called dad because he's immature. He thinks he'll be uncool if he's somebody's dad, so he tries to dismiss it as, like, just call me Shogun. And then he doesn't care what boy wants to be called. He just, he's like, yeah, it'd be funny. And then he sees Holden and Kingy show up because he's invited Holden to be in the gang. Holden was the kid that was going to he was going to kick off boys' nuts and then he'd have none, which was another hilarious line. And he doesn't care that bothers Boy. The character that he's playing is supposed to be a dick that's self-absorbed and doesn't pay attention to other people. And so not making eye contact with other people
Right.
can be taken that way. It isn't always that. I'm bad at eye contact,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the autism. But some people, he's not thinking of anybody but himself at any point in the film until the very, very end.
I am just imagining how great this film would have been if we'd had a real good actor to act as a backstop, as a villain, as a foil for this film, for the young version of the young Alame slash boy slash little Shogun.
That might be part of it. He's not a villain. Alamein isn't a villain. He's just an idiot. He's not meant to be a bad person. There really isn't a villain in this film.
Well, and
It's,
you have to have him be an idiot because otherwise he's abusive, right? You can't he
yeah.
can't you
I'm
can't
not
have a
saying he's not
comedy.
abusive.
You
Yeah.
can't have a comedy about this level of psychological depravity without
Yeah.
making your villain a moron or at least the butt of a joke. You just can't. It would not, because it's not funny. Because it's simply
That's
not
true.
funny.
He's dealing with his own share of trauma, not just from Alamein's mother dying, but from growing up as a poor indigenous kid in a world that was not good to poor indigenous kids.
He returns for two reasons.
Mhm.
To either find the money or to, in the biggest inverted commas on the face of this planet, borrow it from his nan, from his mom.
Right.
He's there for
Yeah,
money.
that's the only reason he's there. Yeah.
And what's great about the scene that you mentioned is your favorite is that he almost had forgotten he had children. It seems like. Oh wait, I'm your dad.
Yeah,
Oh
I think
crap!
at the
And there's sand in the cog. Because his plan was simply to come in and either find the money or get the money from his mom. Neither of which works.
see, I don't think he realizes that that's the kind of person that he's being.
Did Hitler in Jojo Rabbit know that he was a rabid anti-Semite and a psychopath?
He was a figment of the kid's imagination, so I don't think he did know. But
In a
as
way,
this movie
but
went
and
on,
in a
he
way,
got worse and worse.
in a way, isn't Alamein a figment of Alamein Junior slash boy slash Little Shogun's imagination in this film, or
Um,
much of what we see of him is?
what we originally see of him, yeah, that's his imagination. I don't think at heart he means to be as bad as he is. Because when his mother tells him to spend quality time with the kids, he tries to. He only tries it the one time and then forgets all about it. But he does. It seemed to me that he did want to do the right thing by these kids. And then at the end of the film, you see he's had a change of heart. That's why he puts the eyes in the carving and leaves his Crazy Horses patch in the garage and finally goes to Joni's grave, Alamein's mother. He hadn't done that. The part of the film where Rocky finally decides he wants to get to know Alamein is when he sees him outside the cemetery, not able to bring himself inside. He's outside. He wants to go in. He's kind of pacing back and forth, and then he just leaves. And that's when Rocky goes to help him try to dig up the money. Up until that point, he really wasn't interested in getting to know his father. But then he realized, there's something going on here. Even as a little 6-year-old, he figured out there's
I
something
read
going
it.
on that I
No,
didn't know.
I read that differently.
Okay.
I read that as Rocky seeing him and the distress that he was caused, feeling guilt for having caused his mother's death, and putting away his resentment or hostility towards his father because of the guilt that he felt in Rocky's mind killing his mother. That's how I read that. And that was what
Yeah,
that was about.
that makes sense too. Yeah. I think it's both. He feels guilty, but it also makes him want to, I guess, comfort
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, I guess the two comfort the two can coexist. But that was just my
Now,
reading.
how many ice blocks can I get for $5, eh?
$5 in the real world or Monopoly Land?
Thanks, boy.
Don't call me that anymore.
What, boy?
Yeah, I don't like it.
What about Fonzie?
Just call me Little Shogun.
Thanks, little Shogun.
Thanks, little Shogun.
Thanks, little Shogun.
Thanks, little Fonzie.
You look like Michael Jackson in that jacket.
Yeah, bro. Scored from the old man.
Boy slash LMA Junior slash Little Shogun finds the money, and he uses it to buy his friends what they call block ice, which are popsicles here in the United States. This film has not set me up to feel good about this character for too long. What's going to happen? And lo and behold, Alame walks in and he's all pissed off because he's wearing his jacket. And when you see him actually trying to, in inverted commas, be a father, you see he is horrible at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It's
then it's highlighted by one of the funnier lines of the film because the aunt comes out and starts screaming about just what bad parenting this is, and without a face of irony, he says, "I'm trying to teach the boy not to steal."
right. Yeah, you did a great job there, buddy. Where'd that money come from? Hmm. He's never seen that side of his father. He has no idea that his father could be that aggressive and angry toward him. And it takes Auntie Gracie to come and break it up. And then we see his childishness again when Alamein jumps in the car and she called him a disgrace or something. And he comes back with, I know you are. I said you are, but what am I? And then drives away. Like, seriously? That's your comeback? It's extremely childish.
in his defense, he is rubber and she is glue, and what she says
Indeed.
bounces off of him and does stick to her. The scene that follows that at the nightclub, we're back into fantasy, and you get both Rocky's fantasy and you get Alabay Jr. / voice / Little Shogun's fantasy. And one, of course, is this kind of animated doom when the rival gang comes up whose marijuana plants they've stolen. That's, of course, what Rocky gives you. But it's crisscrossed with this version of Michael Jackson's Beat It played out to Maori music. A bit like the tea scene where it just cuts to them with the tea inside the car. It cuts to them back inside the car, beaten to just smithereens by this gang. And you would think that would be the end of Boy slash. I'm just gonna call him Boy from now on because
Yeah, just call him boy. Yeah.
that's just too long a title. Boy fantasizing about his father, but he continues to even after his father leaves. He fantasizes about his father going to Japan to become a shogun.
Yeah.
So he can't
I
stop
like that.
worshiping it as long as he's not there. He can't work. He can no longer worship the man that's in front of him, but as long as he's not in his sight, he still worships him.
Yeah, there was an interview with Taika about that, where he said that over the course of the film, you see that the fantasies that Boy has about his father kind of fade, but they never fully go away. They just become more, he knows they're not real. Um, it's more comforting than anything else. He can just pretend that that's what's happening because he doesn't know where his father went, so he'll just pretend. But I really like that scene with the fight because you see the biker gang that wants to get their marijuana back. They come in and he imagines the Beat It thing, and then immediately the music stops and it cuts to Dynasty's father knocking the beer out of Alameин's hands, and they all get their asses kicked. And then after that, Alamein is like, "Man, that was fun," and the other guys were like, "Excuse me, what fight were you in?" Because
Well,
they all had the crap beaten out of
that's
them.
when the other two realize
Yeah,
this is not
they're not going to get
somebody.
that money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is not somebody we're dealing with a full deck. Yeah, and of course that's
yeah,
when that's when they take his stash and drive off.
yeah,
Is right after that.
yeah. I think the car is funny to me because the car is a really good representation. It's a good symbol of who Alamein is. It's a piece of junk, but everybody's in awe of it when he shows up and it's
Okay.
a Chrysler Valiant Ranger that was built in Australia and it was designed in Australia. It's like the first
Oh,
car ever to be completely designed in Australia. And it also can be started with a spoon.
I thought
It's
that
not
was
a
also a
sign of high quality.
fun. I also thought that was a fun reference to the escape scene from the beginning, where he digs himself
Yeah.
out with a spoon and that he could. Yeah. Yes, it is junky, but if you're in a town where nobody else seems to even own a car, those bikers don't show up in cars. That's probably the hottest thing. Hot is in the eyes of the beholder. If you were hired by the studio to sell Boy, convince me
Okay.
why I should see this film.
It's a beautifully written, beautifully acted, beautifully shot, heartfelt piece of comedy and drama about fathers and sons and dreams and maturity and families. It's all about growing up and learning what's real and what's not. I think that's how I would sell it.
If you liked American Graffiti and you loved Harold and Maude, and you think Wes Anderson movies aren't quite weird enough, have I got a movie for you?
Nice.
That would be my selling
That's the elevator pitch. Yeah.
point.
Nice. I should get better at my elevator pitches if I ever want to sell a film. I have to finish the script first. That'd be great.
Wow. I have a drawer full of scripts. You can just have any one of mine if you want. They're finished. Yeah.
Well, why don't you get them done? Why don't you find some filmmaker friends and start shooting them?
How do you think this podcast started? I had a screenplay for a musical called The Bulgarians. We got together to talk about it, and all we could talk about was our favorite movies. And I was like, oh, okay. Well,
I think you should go for it.
the screenplay
What?
the screenplay is online. If anybody wants to read it, just Google the Bulgarians Eric Trommater and it'll pop right up. Anybody who wants reads that and says, "Hey, I know, I've got a vision for this," just get a hold of me at the artist formerly known as Twitter on @etrommater. Where can people get a hold of you?
I am on Blue Sky. I am at Toad Puppy on Blue Sky.
Toad
Um,
puppy. Toad
Hang
puppy.
on, Toad Puppy.
Toad
Yeah,
puppy.
let me see. At toadpuppy.bsky.social. I'm Toad Puppy pretty much everywhere.
Toad
I
puppy.
also have a YouTube channel. Yeah, so if you want to see the weird stuff I do, that's mine at Pizza Horse Productions.
And of course,
So
so at World Cinema History, we're at World Cine, CINE Hist on YouTube and also on Spotify and Apple. So catch us there.
thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it because I can info dump for hours about Taika, about this film or any of his films.
And
And also,
if someone would like to hear her info dump for exactly 1 hour and 7 minutes about Taika Waititi, go back to last season on her episode entitled "Why I Love Taika Waititi and You Should Too" here on World Cinema History. Dun dun dun.
awesome. Thank you for the plug of that episode. One final thing I do want to say, I know you were critical of Taika's acting, and that's totally your opinion. That's totally fine. He would be the first person to tell you that he's a better director and writer than an actor. So you're not wrong.
And I would be the
What
second
you are
one to
saying
tell
is
you
fine.
he's a much better writer director than he is an actor.
He's a brilliant director and writer. Dude,
He
he
is.
got an Oscar nomination for his first short film. Two Cars One Night was his first Oscar nomination, like 2005. And it's like, as
Okay,
a filmmaker, I'm like, how did you do this?
and he's not too bad an actor because he pretended to be asleep that night, and I fell for it
Yes, he did.
at the
And
Academy
nobody else
Awards.
would do it.
Yeah,
Everybody else was supposed to do that. They wouldn't do it.
all the nominees were like, "Yeah, sure, Taika, we'll do that." Watch this guy. It's almost like a scene from one of his films.
Yeah, seriously. So I think that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on World Cinema History.
Considering the hostility I got last week about claiming that perhaps the whole rapture thing might not be in the Bible,
Did you?
yeah, I got some shit.
Oh my God!
Yeah, we're not.
Good Lord.
Who I assume just go around looking for anything with the word saint in the title or the name of a saint in the title.
Yes.
But or said to you, I'm an Episcopalian. One of them wrote that an Episcopalian is actually worse than an atheist because it's actually ushering in the Antichrist, where the atheist just doesn't believe in it. And you can see
Not
why.
based in reality.
But I didn't reply to.
God.
But you can see why I didn't reply to him. It was because I don't
Oh
take
yeah.
that. I'm not taking him seriously. Because my
Yeah.
reply would have been, "Is this satire?
Seriously. No, they're serious. That's
Is
how I'm related to folks like that.
but you get my point. You get my point. It's
Yeah.
like what what's my reply going to be? So I I have a feeling we'll get some letters next week too. But
Interesting.
um
Okay. Well, we'll see.
I don't know. I don't really mind pissing off the mag hats, and I don't really mind pissing off the woke mob on Twitter because to me they're both the same thing. They're both exactly the same person. They may believe exactly opposite, but
Hmm.
they're both just self-righteous individuals who think that their limited education has given them enough to tell the rest of us how we have to live our lives.
So I don't go on Twitter.
And so
They're all assholes.
they're all assholes. They're bigger assholes, actually. on George Bernard Shaw being as an example of an artist who I love their work, but they themselves had despicable views. And I use the example that George Bernard Shaw gave radio addresses in support of Joseph Stalin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on Blue Sky, I
Yeah.
immediately got a response. Oh, so you're mad at him for his address on Joseph Stalin, but not his embrace of Mussolini in 1927.
You can dislike both. That's weird.
And that's just too much of that on Blue Sky. The if you post about cats, oh, you love cats. Why do you hate guinea pigs so much? You should educate yourself. I can't fucking stand.
Oh,
I can't fucking stand Blue Sky for that. It's just
yeah.
thick with it. You know, at least on Twitter, people are old hat. They're not learning this all for the first time the way so many of those people on Blue Sky are. You know,
Yeah.
they've all been through all this shit. They don't need to, they don't need to show their credentials. You know, at least the trolls there are bots. So
Yeah.
you know, it's like, oh, I bet that sounded much better in its original Russian.
Yeah.
This might make for a good Easter egg.
That's true. I have my Blue Sky very curated, so I don't see a lot of that. I just see the Flag Means Death fandom, and that's about it.
And I wonder if that's because you can curate it so much. I wonder if that's what leads to this kind of this attitude of this "you should educate yourself" attitude
Possibly.
that it has, because
But you
people
might
have
just be running into
so
assholes.
well. But I think the reason why you see it more, I think, on Blue Sky is people have so isolated themselves that they forget that they're not in their little dome, their little curated dome, and so when they accidentally branch out of it, they seem shocked that people have opinions that they haven't heard before. You
Yeah.
know, because it's so easy to just curate yourself into a corner on that.
Want to go there and see politics. I want to go there and see the fandom.
And see, and
And that's like all I want to see.
restart me and bring back our flag means stuff. Yep, I got it. I got it.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's sad
There's
there's
so
no.
much horrible stuff in the world.
It's sad
I
there's
want a
no
little
movement like
retreat
that
from,
for Time Bandits.
That's sad too, because that was a great series.
I actually thought it
I
was.
really liked that.
I thought Time Bandits was really well done. The only thing,
It was.
it was probably aimed just a little too young,
Yeah, it was definitely aimed more towards kids than adults.
and maybe that's why it wasn't a hit. It is, I think, an example of people putting people into a box, and when the product doesn't fit what you conceived of them as being ahead of time,
Yeah.
they're automatically disappointed. They tried something new. You know, this was lit. I think people were expecting either the Terry Gilliam movie or
Mhm.
What We Do in the Shadows with dwarfs and time travel. Now, of course, I'm gonna. Luckily, Burnett, this isn't part of the podcast because we've already had this. I don't think he was very good on the show. I just don't. I just
He
don't.
wasn't on there very much, though.
No, thankfully. But I honestly think if they had given him one of those snidely whiplash mustaches that he could twirl, he would have. That was the kind of line delivery he
Probably.
was given.
He can be a little over the top, and I think that he can be really great when he's got the right director.
Well, what was that Ryan Reynolds movie he was in that he was just terrible in? And he was cast perfect, and he was perfect for the role.
Oh wait, Free Guy?
Yeah, Free Guy, and he
Yeah,
was just
that's fun.
terrible in that film. And I thought to myself, my goodness, why would you let them do that to you? How didn't you see the rushes? Didn't they let you see the rushes? Didn't you see how you were? No, I'm not a burning man. Or what was it he did so terrible? Oh, the sequel. Sequel. Yeah, like what a terrible line delivery. Just how, like how
He's doing that on purpose. I
Yes,
think he was doing that on purpose. He does a lot of things being
yeah,
obnoxious on purpose
yeah. Oh,
as a joke.
and he was playing an obnoxious character. It's not the obnoxiousness; it's
Yeah,
the bad acting. This, there's a difference.
I think we have very different views of Taika.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
I think he's great.
Oh,
Honestly, I think he's great.
I think he's great. He's
Yeah,
absolutely
I
great. He
mean,
was bad in that movie, though. That I think is objective. I just do.
that's fair.
He was objectively bad
That's
in
fair.
Free Guy. I don't think he was objectively bad well, okay, he was objectively bad in Time Bandits, but luckily he wasn't on screen for very long. Wow! I expected to tie a woman to a railroad track, um, but he definitely wasn't objectively bad in Boy at all. It just or Jojo Rabbit. I just thought he was the weakest part of both really excellent films, if that makes sense to you.
And I think he would agree with you, but so that's fine. You can
And he'd be right.
we we have very different views of him.
Yeah.
I think a lot of what he does is meant to be
Well,
odd,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
and because that's a sense of humor.
Yeah. Well, like his character in
Um,
Thor Ragnarok is, what's his character's name? Korg?
Korg, yeah.
Yeah, Korg. I am made of rocks. I'm a man of made of rocks. Uh, rock, paper,
Oh, Ghost.
rock, paper, scissors joke for you. Yeah. You know.
I wish I could do the accent. Like when he kicked the wall, he goes, "Fuck off, Ghost."
Yeah.